SparkLE is a sort of distilled version of the bigger Spark creative drum machine system. It's the same idea, exactly the same thing. It's basically a dedicated piece of control hardware, performance hardware, which you use to control software running on the computer. Concept exactly the same. Obviously, it's a totally new form factor. So the LE controller is tiny, actually. If we look at this, it's 1.6 centimeters deep, which is pretty ridiculous. It's really solid and kind of chunky. It feels like it wouldn't be a problem to sort of chuck it in a bag, which is no bad thing because Arturia actually give you this sort of natty little neoprene bag with every Spark. So let's take a look. Let's kind of see what it can do, and maybe I'll talk you through the kind of layout so you can see what's changed. So to sort of walk you through what it can do, it is a complete drum performance system. So designed to be used live, designed to be used in a production environment. It will marry happily with the DAW, or like we've got running here, it will run standalone. It's really fun as well, and that's kind of the point of the hardware. You can just kind of come up with drum loops. You know, you really experiment and kind of tune and get sounds right, and that's sort of the strength of it. It's more of it's a drum synth, it's a drum system. You know, it has 3 different types of drum synthesis. That's subtractive, physical modeling, and sampling as well. So you can load samples into it. And actually some of the new stuff and what came out and over a period of years at the development of the original Spark, things like tune mode. There's actually now, interestingly, a dedicated tune button, and that means you can kind of play melodies on it too. So as this kind of tactile ideas generation device, it's absolutely brilliant, and totally happy to kind of work standalone and again like integrate into what you're already using. Basically up here we've got playback control, so stop, play, pause, and an arming recording for when I want to play the performance pads. Below it we've got what are called the pad controls. So we've got the ability to basically bank through 2 sets of pads, and what you see here is I've actually got 8 sounds loaded up. If I push this button, then it takes me to another bank of sounds, 9 to 16. We've actually got 16 sounds, even though there's 8 pads. You've got mutes, which is very important. So when we're playing back the pattern, we can basically mute sounds on and off. Really, really good for performance. And then sort of similar, but slightly different function, is solo. So I just unmute this, and then solo. Solo gives us soloing. We can just bring things in. But with all of these, you notice that these little indicators, and actually that's what the select button is there to do. So select lets us access the secondary function of these buttons. So if I press under here is clear, that clears the soloing that I did. And similarly, if I did some mutes and then I hit clear, that clears the mutes. It's really good if you're performing. So you know, you can be like kind of mute the bass drums, and you've got like a rolling hi-hat section, and then you can bring the rest of the tune back in. That's basically, well, I kind of covered the select button a little bit, but if you double click it, you'll see on the software, it actually shows us these kind of secondary functions. There's some which aren't marked on the software because they may change in future and actually more may be added. So you can see here, main, pattern, song, prefs. That means that if I hold select and then push these buttons, it allows us to basically browse through the software without needing to touch the mouse. So again, it's that thing you can kind of, if you were on stage, you'd maybe have your laptop visible, but you wouldn't be using it. You'd just be using it as a monitor just to show you some extra detail if you needed it. To the right of that, we've got this awesome thing, which is the sort of touchpad. Now, the touchpad lets us do a number of effects. It lets us engage various effects and kind of choose them and play with them. Actually, due to the fact that Spark is more compacted, on the bigger Spark software, we had this row kind of times 8. There was 8 of those. And now some of those functions, obviously they're rolled into that. And there are other dedicated buttons, dedicated dials, sorry, which have been incorporated into this pad, which is actually from a creative side quite interesting. So for example, pan and level, rather than being done on a knob, pan and level is done on an XY grid. So in the middle, I've got it panned totally to the center. There I've got the snare drum pan to the left and now to the right, but volume is controlled by the vertical axis. So actually in just one press, you can jump to various settings. You can actually affect 2 settings at once, which is quite interesting. Similarly, sends are handled by the axes as well. So if I do up, it's sending to aux 2, and if I do to the right, it's sending to aux 1. It means that basically if I put it somewhere in the middle, I'm actually sending to a little bit of both, or you can just sort of run your finger along the edges and you only access one. It's a really, really clever thing. So it's kind of, you know, although it's in a sense it's a compromise, in another sense it's actually quite a nice way of working, because you can do 2 controls at the same time. Loads of cool stuff in there. Here we've got the jog dial, which lets us kind of browse kits and sounds. See here I'm looking through various different things. We can load up a DR707, loaded up the kit without touching a mouse. Maybe I want to try something else. You can just hit it, load it, and it's good to go. If you want to change certain instruments, we do that by selecting the instrument in question. What do we like? Okay, well, that's quite a good bass drum actually. But maybe we want to change this. If I select it, I can basically just change the snare there. You see it's going through the various different snare sounds. So I can have a 909 snare. So really easy. You can just basically browse kits. You can just sit sort of comfortably in a chair. You're not leaning over a mouse. Basically, you can just do it from the controller. Here you've got the instrument parameters. These are cool. These are totally variable. Again, on the bigger Spark controller, we had 8 of these, a whole row of 8, which is awesome. But it does make it bigger, obviously. So there's just one. But what you do is you select the sound, and then these will basically control the sound that's selected. They're totally endless, so you can just keep rolling them. And if you jump to another setting, jump to another sound, the setting won't jump, basically. It's relative. Here you can see that we've got this selector controlling pitch. But if I want that to control something else, via this shortcut, if I hold select, you see here on the software, I can actually vary what that sound is. I can vary, what that controller does. So maybe I want to control like the cutoff. So you can use that, and it's up to you. You can basically choose whatever kind of functions you want these to do. So totally flexible, but they're kind of performance parameters, and they're really useful for kind of tuning sounds and you know, obviously toning bass drums and making it your own, like changing your own, you know, making your own kit basically. So down here we've got bank and pattern selection. I can basically choose banks A, B, and C, and D with this. If I just do that, now I'm choosing bank B, and then you can choose a pattern from it, anything from 1 to 16, so maybe I'll choose 5. And you can just change that on the fly. And this lets you kind of perform preset patterns, or just browse through the ones that already exist, and then you can sort of modify them to your liking. Here's the sort of killer bit, is the sequencer button. So this is what actually lets us basically 808 style edit the drums. So if I choose something that's got some information on it, that's maybe a sound that's not as obvious in the mix, but let's check the bass drum. So you see I can program 808 style, but kind of the whole hook with Spark is that you've got a choice, because you also have these performance pads. So if you were to like erase this pattern, which I would do by going to pattern and then erase, which one am I on? I'm on 14, so erase pattern 14, no sound. What's going on? It's because I've just erased it, obviously. So I can hit play and then go select metronome, arm recording, put it in sequencer mode so we can see the rolling dial. And if I now select that sound, look, you can see that the information is here. I can just add in notes, and then I can tune it. Cool. So yeah, you have this choice, basically 808 style. or 808 style, or kind of MPC style. Okay, wait. Another thing we've got, which is actually new for SparkLE, is this tune button. This is very cool. And it wasn't actually something that had a dedicated button on the original hardware. It was a feature that was added using a shortcut later. What it is if you can see on the software, there are numbers which go along the 808 pads. And they correspond to sort of chromatic shifts up and down of the sort of root pitch. It means that they become like a keyboard. So you can actually kind of play bass lines. You can also tune bass drums and get these kind of melodic shifts. So your bass drum is kind of following the kind of chord change, which is super cool. It just sort of expands it in terms of an ideas generation machine, because you can kind of start to do melodic things as well as just drums. So if you just want a bit of bass, or you just want like hooks and kind of go for a more sample based approach, it's just something that's really expands its capability. And there's a dedicated button for it, which is awesome. So you can kind of So you need to see, we can start to introduce melodic ideas to drum beats. Anyway, again, we'll get just carried away with myself. Copy and erase button, so you can copy parts, and erase is obviously lets you erase patterns basically, and the sort of the information on certain pads. So I can kind of undo that tuning that I just did. So now that part is clear, and I can kind of try different ideas. Again, getting carried away by myself. Pattern length, you can have patterns of up to 64 steps, and we can basically increase or decrease that by holding the select button. So it'll just copy what I did. Once I've shrunk it down, if I expand it out, it'll just sort of loop it round onto the next set, and you'll see that it'll, I've actually turned follow off. You can have it so that the display will follow the currently active section. I actually prefer it like this, so I can kind of focus on steps 1 to 16, and then I'm happy kind of move on to 17 to 32, rather than Spark moving for me. But you can work both ways depending on what you prefer. Here's the loop divider and kind of move section. This is really cool. This means you can basically do these sort of like drills and grabs of various sections of the sequencer. So that's just a sort of overview of the hardware, basically. I mean, there's not a huge amount else to point out. It's pretty self-contained, and for basically all of the things that you need in order to sort of create, find, edit, and experiment and sequence sounds, it's all just on this little bit of kit. So you can kind of sit and just use the hardware and leave the computer off to one side and kind of focus on, you know, what hardware does best, which is just, you know, focus, put on a pair of headphones, shut the door, and kind of come up with ideas. That's its total strength. There is obviously extra stuff which is on the software, in terms of if you want to get really in depth and make your own sounds, make your own kits, edit what's already there. You might find it helpful to kind of get an overview of this stuff. And there's some really cool things you can do with sampling, in terms of layering samples and doing kind of round robin, so that when you do kind of drills, it'll actually be choosing different sounds each time. There's some really interesting stuff that you can do with that. So maybe what we should do is just kind of play around a bit, and I'll just make some sounds, and you can kind of, I'll talk you through what I'm doing, you know, try and explain sort of how I'm using the various things. Okay, so let's load up a different kit and mess around. So where is Miami Club? These are all alphabetized, so it's probably there. Okay, so Miami Club, and that was sounds 1 to 8, and then obviously we've got you've got all your other sounds on 9 to 16, 1 to 8, 9 to 16, depending on whether the light is lit. So let us maybe, let's pick a kind of, invoke a kind of classic exterminated rodent sort of tempo, and then maybe I'll just erase this. So sorry to whoever made this, I do apologize, but I'm going to erase that pattern, which was 8. Okay, so with that erased, let's now play, and there's nothing there, obviously. So I think I can play that. I think I'm capable. And we'll turn off the metronome. Oh. That's cool. If I want to just erase that or undo it, just hit select and undo. That takes away the previous action, which was to put that in. Let's actually use the roller instead. And what's interesting is, depending on how hard I push the pad, I can actually slowly vary the volume of the sound. It's basically, they're pressure sensitive as well as being velocity sensitive. Now let's find that bass sound. Get something more harsh. And maybe I want to adjust the volume of that. And I've just selected pan and level. Just to adjust the volume with my finger until it's right. And then if I want to add an extra bar, because I want to get this kind of happening in a sec, hold select, and now that's added a second bar. And it's just copied the first one. Globally filtering. If we want to change the sort of response of the filter, kind of what it does, we can actually page through it like that, and you'll see on the software it's varying. If I hold it down, I can also use the pad to select it too. So you can use a number of different ways to skin the cat, basically, do the same thing. That sounds pretty good. And then similarly with the slicer, there's different things like tape. Nice. Yeah, fun. Changing the pattern. And back. And back to my pattern. Fun. Alright, let's try something else. What else have we got? Like, do you like Berlin Electro? Let's try that. Where are you? You're probably in B. That will probably be where Berlin Electro is. So let's load that up. And then... And I'm mad, that one. Let's try this pattern. And that's been done with the tune mode, that kind of flying sort of crazy sound. And let's use the mute, so we can just kind of... And this is great if you're like, if you've already got the pattern made and you know exactly what everything's going to be, you can kind of vary the, just bring it in and out basically, and then clear it with this for when the drop happens. Soloing. Yeah. Okay, as a sort of last example, I've got this pre-made batch of kind of mad sort of samples and sound effects, which I've added a bass drum and snare drum to, just sort of turn it into a kind of something that kicks. And maybe if I just sort of just play around and come up with something. I'll put on the metronome and then look at the sequencer. So, and I quite like this sort of sound. Where is it? See the notes in here. Metronome off. We'll establish the rhythm. Okay. So the software is exactly the same, and it's really just the hardware that's changed. It's gotten smaller, more compact, but you can still do all the same sorts of things, and all the sort of major performance stuff is there. It's really good. Go and find a dealer who's got SparkLE, or download the software. You can actually get the software demo, and you can just mess around. You don't need the hardware to be connected. So if you were kind of out and about, you're away from your hardware, yeah, you can actually still keep making music. But as I say, you get your natty pads, so no excuse. You've got to like take your Spark with you everywhere. So cool. Thanks very much for tuning in. Check out SparkLE, www.arturia.com, and thanks very much for watching. Cheers.